I was standing in the cereal aisle of a grocery store in Portland when I found out my childhood home had been sold. Not from my mother, not from a phone call, not even from a letter. I found out because a woman I'd never met posted a photo on a neighborhood Facebook group. She was holding a set of keys, smiling in front of a yellow door I would have recognized anywhere on this planet. The caption read, "So excited to finally close on our dream home, 4827 Linden Terrace. Here we go." My name is Jessamine Corwill. I'm 24 years old and I work as a veterinary technician at a small animal clinic on the east side of Portland. I'm not rich. I'm not dramatic. I'm the kind of person who pays her rent 3 days early and apologizes when someone else steps on my foot. And on a Tuesday afternoon in October, standing between boxes of Cheerios and granola bars, I learned that my mother had sold the house I grew up in, the house my father built the back porch on with his own hands, and she never said a single word to me about it. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. A stock boy asked me if I was okay. I told him yes. That was a lie. See, it wasn't just a house. That house was the last thing I had left of my father. He died when I was 15, and after that, everything changed. Everything. The walls of that house still held his pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe where he measured my height every birthday. The garage still had the workbench he built the summer before he got sick. The backyard had the cherry tree we planted together when I was 7, back when I thought trees grew overnight if you wished hard enough. And my mother sold all of it, without a conversation, without a warning, without even a text message. Before I go on, if this story hits close to home for you, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Drop your location and the time where you are right now in the comments. I always love knowing where you all are, listening from. Now, let me take you back to how this started. I tried calling her. Standing right there in that grocery store with my cart half full, I called her 4 times. Each call rang out to voicemail. The 5th time, it didn't even ring. She'd turned off her phone. Or blocked me. At that point, I couldn't tell the difference, and honestly, with my mother, both options were equally likely. I drove home in a kind of fog. My apartment is a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian. It's small. The kitchen faucet drips. But it's mine, and I earned it. And on most days, that's enough. That night, it didn't feel like enough. That night, nothing felt like enough. I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled through the Facebook post again. 47 likes, 12 comments, people congratulating this stranger on buying my father's house. Someone wrote, "That porch is gorgeous." And I almost threw my phone at the wall because, yes, it was gorgeous, and my father sanded every single board of it by hand, and none of these people knew that. And now, none of them ever would. I want to be honest with you about something. When I tell you what happened next, what my mother did, what she said, and what I eventually discovered about why she really sold that house, you're going to think I'm exaggerating. I thought so too, for a while. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Mothers don't do things like this to their daughters. Not without a reason. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the reason is the part that hurts most. Because it wasn't just about money. It wasn't about downsizing or debt or any of the things a normal person might assume. What my mother did with the money from that house, and who she did it for, is something I still have trouble saying out loud even now. And the moment the new owner knocked on my mother's apartment door 3 months later, the moment that stranger stood on her welcome mat holding a shoebox she'd found hidden in the attic crawl space, that's when the whole thing cracked wide open. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. Back to Linden Terrace. Back to the yellow door. Back to the beginning, when I still believed my mother loved me the same way she loved my brother. That was my first mistake. I need to tell you about the house first, because if you don't understand the house, You won't understand anything that comes after. 4827 Linden Terrace sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Milwaukee, just south of Portland. It was a 3-bedroom craftsman, nothing fancy. White siding, green shutters, and that yellow front door my father painted the spring I turned 4. I remember watching him do it. He let me hold the paint tray, which in hindsight was a terrible idea for a 4-year-old, but that was my dad. He believed in letting me try things. He believed in letting me be part of things. His name was George Corwell. He was a cabinet maker. He worked out of a small shop near the Clackamas River, building custom kitchen cabinets and bookshelves for people who wanted something real, something made with hands instead of machines. He wasn't a loud man. He wasn't the type to fill a room with his voice. But when he was in that house, sanding something at his workbench, grilling chicken on the back patio, sitting in his recliner reading one of his detective novels, the house felt full. It felt like the walls were breathing. My mother is Lorraine Corwell. She worked part-time at a dental office doing reception and billing. She was always put together. Hair done, nails done, clothes ironed even on weekends. She cared about appearances in a way my father never did, and I think that difference sat between them like a low wall neither of them ever mentioned, but both of them always stepped around. Then there's my brother, Tobias. Toby, 2 years older than me. If I'm being fair, and I'm trying to be, Toby wasn't a bad kid growing up. He was charming. He had this loose, easy way about him that made teachers forgive late assignments and made neighbors laugh even when he trampled their flower beds on his bike. He was the kind of boy people called a handful, with affection in their voice. And my mother loved that about him. She loved his noise, his mess, his confidence. She called him my bright boy. So often it might as well have been his legal name. Me? I was quiet. I did my homework at the kitchen table without being asked. I fed the cat. I swept the porch on Saturdays, because my dad asked me to once, and I just never stopped. I wasn't difficult. And I think that was the problem. I wasn't difficult, so I wasn't interesting. I wasn't interesting, so I wasn't seen. I want to give you a specific memory because I think it explains everything. When I was 12, I won a regional science competition. I'd built a working model of a water filtration system using sand, charcoal, and gravel. I spent 6 weeks on it. My dad helped me source the materials, drove me to the hardware store 3 different times, and sat with me at the kitchen table testing flow rates with a stopwatch. When I won, he cried. Right there in the school gymnasium, standing next to the bleachers, my dad pressed his hand over his mouth and cried. My mother didn't come to the competition. She was at Toby's baseball game. He was the backup shortstop. He didn't play a single inning that day. But she was there, in the bleachers, with a cooler full of orange slices she'd cut that morning. When I got home with my trophy, she glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Jess. Put it somewhere it won't collect dust." I put it on my dresser. It stayed there for years. When I eventually moved out at 19, I took it with me. It's on my bookshelf right now, in my apartment. The gold plastic is fading. I don't care. My father touched that trophy. After Dad died, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by August the year I turned 15, the house changed. Not physically. The walls were the same, the furniture was the same. But the air inside it went stale, like someone had sealed all the windows and forgotten to open them again. My mother grieved, but she grieved in a way that felt more like reorganizing than mourning. Within 3 weeks of the funeral, she donated most of his clothes. Within 2 months, the workbench in the garage was gone, replaced by storage bins full of holiday decorations she never put up. She removed his recliner. She painted over the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe, the ones that tracked my height from age 3 to 14, without telling me. I came home from school one day and they were just gone, covered by a fresh coat of eggshell white. I stood in that kitchen staring at the blank wall and felt something shift inside me, like a bone resetting in a direction it was never meant to go. I didn't say anything. I just walked to my room and closed the door. Toby, meanwhile, got everything he asked for. New sneakers, a used car at 17, money for prom, for football camp, for a spring break trip to California with his friends. My mother never said no to him. Not once. When I asked if I could take an SAT prep course, $80 for 6 sessions at the community center, she told me we couldn't afford extras right now. That same week, she bought Toby a $200 jacket he wore exactly 3 times. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because this pattern, this invisible, constant pattern of being second, is what made it possible for her to sell that house without telling me. By the time she did it, she had already been erasing me for years. The house was just the last thing left to erase. And here's what I didn't know yet. What I wouldn't find out until much later. Toby had been talking to her about selling for over a year before it happened. He needed money. He always needed money. And my mother, who could never say no to her bright boy, found the one thing she had left that was worth enough to say yes. But the night I found out, sitting alone in my apartment with that Facebook post burned into my phone screen, I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that the only place left on earth that still felt like my father was gone. And my mother hadn't even given me the chance to say goodbye to it. I called her again the next morning. This time, she answered. And what she said to me in that 3-minute phone call is something I will carry for the rest of my life. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was calm, almost breezy, like I was calling to ask about a recipe. "Oh, Jessamine, hi." Not, "Hey, sweetie," not, "I've been meaning to call you." Just my full name, flat and measured, the way you'd greet a coworker you don't particularly like but have to be polite to. I said, "Mom, did you sell the house?" There was a pause. Not a long one. Maybe 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds I could hear her deciding something. I could hear the gears turning, the options being weighed. Deny it, deflect it, or own it in a way that made me the unreasonable one for asking. She chose the third option. She always chose the third option. Yes, I did. It closed about 3 weeks ago. I'm in an apartment now, over on Multnomah Boulevard. It's a nice little 1-bedroom. Very manageable. 3 weeks. She had sold the house, packed her things, moved to a new apartment, and settled in, all without a single phone call, text, or email to her only daughter. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My voice cracked on the word tell. I hated that it cracked. I wanted to sound steady. I wanted to sound like someone who could handle this. But I was sitting on my bathroom floor because my legs had given out the moment she confirmed it, and the tile was cold under my knees, and I was 24 years old, pressing my forehead against the edge of the bathtub, trying not to fall apart. "Jessamine, it's a house. It was my house. My name was on the deed. I don't need permission from anyone to manage my own property." Technically, she was right. Legally, the house belonged to her. After Dad died, everything transferred to her name. There was no will that mentioned me or Toby, specifically. Dad had always assumed there would be more time. He was 46 when he died. People don't write detailed wills at 46. They think they'll get around to it. He didn't get around to it. "I'm not saying you needed permission," I said. "I'm saying you could have told me. I grew up there. Dad built the porch. His marks were on the wall. There were things in that house that mattered to me, and you didn't even give me the chance to—" "To what?" she interrupted. Her voice had that edge now, that specific edge she used when she wanted you to know the conversation was over, even though words were still being spoken. "To what, Jessamine? Walk through the rooms and cry? Take pictures of the walls? That house was 32 years old. The roof needed replacing. The foundation had a crack. It was time. It was time, I repeated, like she was talking about pulling a tooth. Yes, it was time. And I got a fair price. And I've moved on. And I'd suggest you do the same. I wanted to ask about the money. I wanted to ask where it went. How much the house sold for. Whether she'd put anything aside. Not for me. I wasn't expecting an inheritance. I just wanted to understand. But something in her tone told me that any question I asked from that point on would be treated as an accusation, and she would use that to make me the villain. She was good at that. She'd had decades of practice. So instead, I asked one more question. Just one. Did Toby know? Silence. Longer this time. 4 seconds. 5. Toby helped me with the paperwork, actually. He found the realtor. He's been very supportive through the whole process. My brother knew. My brother helped. My brother found the realtor who listed my father's house and walked my mother through selling everything our dad ever touched, and neither of them picked up the phone to tell me. I don't remember saying goodbye. I think I just hung up. I sat on that bathroom floor for a long time. The faucet in the tub dripped. I counted the drips because counting gave me something to focus on besides the sound of my own breathing, which had gone shallow and fast in a way I couldn't control. 41 drips before I stood up. I walked to my bookshelf. The science trophy was still there, wedged between a stack of paperbacks and a small framed photo of my dad and me at the coast. Cannon Beach, 2013. I was 11. He was holding a kite shaped like a red fish, and I was laughing because the wind kept stealing it sideways. His hand was on my shoulder. I picked up the photo and held it for a while. I thought about the cherry tree in the backyard. I wondered if the new owner would keep it. I wondered if they even knew it was a cherry tree, or if they'd cut it down to make room for a deck or a hot tub or whatever people put in backyards now. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I called Toby. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting for it. Hey, Jess. You knew the whole time, I said. Look, it was Mom's decision. I just helped with logistics. Logistics. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. You call selling Dad's house logistics? It wasn't Dad's house anymore, Jess. Dad's been gone 9 years. It was Mom's house, and she needed the equity. The place was falling apart. You know that. I know the porch was solid because Dad built it to last. I know the cherry tree was healthy. I know there were things in that attic and that garage that meant something, and nobody asked me if I wanted any of them. There wasn't anything up there. Mom cleared it all out. That stopped me. What do you mean she cleared it all out? Before the listing, she went through everything, donated some stuff, tossed the rest. It's done, Jess. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. That sentence. I'd heard it from both of them my entire life. Every time I had a feeling that was inconvenient. Every time I noticed something unfair. Every time I tried to say, this hurts, I was told I was making it bigger than it needed to be. It was the family motto stitched onto everything they ever handed me. I hung up. I turned off my phone. I walked to the kitchen and stood at the counter and poured myself a glass of water and drank it very slowly because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every birthday my dad measured me on that door frame. I thought about the pencil he used, a flat carpenter's pencil, the kind you sharpen with a knife. I thought about the way he'd press it gently against the top of my head and draw a small line, then write the date next to it in his careful block. Letters, all of it painted over, all of it gone. And somewhere across town, my mother was sleeping in her nice little one-bedroom on Multnomah Boulevard, and my brother was home in his apartment feeling helpful, and I was alone with the understanding that the two people who were supposed to be my family had quietly, deliberately, and without hesitation cut me out of the only thing I had left. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I really slept for weeks after. The days after that phone call moved in a strange, thick way, like walking through water. I went to work. I fed the animals. I smiled at clients and held their dogs steady for blood draws and cleaned kennel floors and did everything I was supposed to do. But underneath all of it, there was this hum. This low, constant frequency of something broken vibrating inside my chest. I kept thinking I'd wake up, and it would feel smaller. That's what people tell you about grief, right? That time softens it. But this wasn't just grief. Grief is when something is taken from you by circumstance. This was chosen. My mother and my brother made a decision, together, in private, and they left me outside of it like I was a neighbor they didn't want to bother. About a week after the phone call, I wrote my mother a letter. A real one. On paper. I sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee going cold next to me, and I wrote 4 pages by hand. I told her what that house meant to me. I told her about the cherry tree, about the doorframe marks, about the workbench. I told her I wasn't angry about the sale itself. I understood she had the legal right. But I told her that not being included, not even being informed, had broken something between us that I didn't know how to fix. I told her I loved her. I said it plainly, without decoration. Because I meant it, and because I thought maybe seeing it in my handwriting would reach whatever part of her still cared about me. I mailed it on Monday. I checked my phone every day that week. Nothing. No call. No text. No letter back. I told myself mail is slow. I told myself she's processing. I told myself she'll come around. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Toby. Not from my mother. From Toby. Got your letter. Mom showed it to me. She thinks you're being manipulative. Her words, not mine. I think you should give her space. My mother read my letter, decided it was manipulation, and handed it to my brother. She didn't respond to me. She responded about me, to someone else. She turned my honesty into evidence against me, and she recruited Toby to deliver the verdict. I stared at that text for a long time. I read it maybe 30 times. Each time I read it, a different word stung. Manipulative, the first few times. Then space. Then, her words, not mine, which was Toby's way of agreeing with her while keeping his hands clean. I typed back. I wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. I was trying to tell her how I feel. He replied almost instantly, I know, but you know how she is. Just let it cool down. Let it cool down. Like I'd started a fire. Like I was the one who did something that needed cooling. I stopped reaching out after that. Not dramatically. I didn't send a final message declaring I was done. I didn't make a speech. I just stopped. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I stopped checking her Facebook page, which I'd been doing every night like picking at a wound. I deleted the app from my phone because I couldn't trust myself not to look at that photo of the new owner standing in front of my father's yellow door. And then I waited. I waited for one of them to notice. November passed. Then December. Christmas came. I spent it alone in my apartment with a frozen lasagna and a movie I don't remember the name of. No call from my mother. No text from Toby. I kept my phone on the coffee table all day, face up, volume on. The screen stayed dark. January was the hardest. Portland in January is gray and wet in a way that seeps into your bones, and my apartment felt smaller every day. I started having trouble eating, not in a dramatic way. I wasn't starving myself. I just forgot. I'd get home from work and realize I hadn't eaten since breakfast. And even then, I'd just stand in front of the fridge and close it again because nothing felt worth the effort. My coworker Danielle noticed. She was the office manager at the clinic. Mid-40s, short gray hair. Always wore these bright orange reading glasses that sat on a chain around her neck. She didn't say anything right away. She just started leaving things on my desk. A granola bar, a tangerine, A little container of soup with a sticky note that said, "Eat this, weirdo." One afternoon in late January, she found me sitting in the break room staring at my phone. I wasn't doing anything with it, just holding it. She sat down across from me and said, "You've been disappearing." I looked at her. "What?" "You're here, but you're not here. You do your job. You smile. You leave. But you're disappearing. I can see it." I don't know why that broke me, but it did. Maybe because it was the first time in months someone had looked at me closely enough to see what was actually happening. I told her everything. The house. The sale. The letter. The text. The silence. I told her about the cherry tree and the doorframe, and the yellow door, and my dad's workbench and all of it. And I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry since the night I found out. Danielle didn't say anything for a while after I finished. She just sat there, hands folded on the table looking at me with those orange glasses pushed up on her head. Then she said something I think about almost every day. You can't make someone see you who's decided you're invisible, but you can stop standing in their blind spot waiting to be found. I didn't fully understand it then, but it planted something. A small, stubborn seed in the middle of all that emptiness. That week, I started doing things differently. Small things. I signed up for a continuing education course in veterinary radiology at Portland Community College. I started walking in the mornings before work. Not far, just 20 minutes around the neighborhood, but enough to feel my legs and breathe cold air and remind myself that my body still worked, even when my heart felt like it didn't. I rearranged my apartment. I moved the bookshelf to the other wall. I hung up a print I'd bought months ago but never framed, a simple watercolor of the Oregon coast. I put the photo of my dad and me at Cannon Beach right next to it. I stopped waiting for my phone to light up. It was a Tuesday night in early February, around 9 o'clock. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my radiology textbook open, highlighter in hand, when I realized something so quiet it almost didn't register. I wasn't thinking about my mother. I wasn't thinking about Toby. I wasn't thinking about the house or the letter or the silence. I was thinking about X-ray positioning for feline thoracic imaging. And it was the first time in 4 months my mind had been somewhere other than that yellow door. I put the highlighter down. I closed the book. I sat there for a minute in the silence of my apartment, and I made a decision. Not a big, dramatic, lightning bolt decision, just a small, steady one. I was going to stop being the person who waited to be included. I was going to build something they couldn't sell out from under me. Something that was mine. Not because it was given to me, but because I built it with my own 2 hands, the way my father built that porch. Board by board. Nail by nail. I picked the highlighter back up. I turned the page. The radiology course changed things for me in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just the material, though I loved that too. The precision of it. The way a properly positioned X-ray could reveal something hidden inside a body that no one could see from the outside. There was something about that idea that felt personal. Things hidden in plain sight. Truths buried under surfaces. I know that sounds dramatic for a veterinary imaging class, but when you've spent your whole life being overlooked, you start to notice metaphors everywhere. The instructor was a woman named Dr. Priya Subramanian. She was a veterinary radiologist who split her time between the community college and a specialty hospital in Beaverton. She was maybe 50, with dark hair she wore in a single braid down her back. And she had this way of teaching that made you feel like you were being trusted with something important. She didn't talk down to the technicians in the class. She talked to us like colleagues who just hadn't learned the thing yet. I started staying after class to ask questions. Not because I was struggling, I was actually doing well, but because I was hungry. Hungry for knowledge, yes, but also hungry for the feeling of being taken seriously, Dr. Subramanian noticed. By the 3rd week, she started saving me journal articles she thought I'd find interesting. She'd hand them to me after class with a small nod, like she was passing along something classified. One night after a lecture on contrast studies, she asked me to stay for a minute. The other students filed out. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and old coffee. She leaned against the front desk and crossed her arms and said, "Have you thought about applying to a specialty certification program?" I hadn't. I didn't even know that was a real option for someone at my level. She told me about the Veterinary Technician Specialist program in diagnostic imaging. It was rigorous. A year-long credentialing track that required case logs, supervised hours, and a board exam. But if I passed, it would change my career. Higher pay, better positions, a credential that opened doors at university hospitals and specialty practices. "You have the eye for it," she said. "And honestly, you have the patience. Most people rush through imaging. You don't. You wait for the right picture." I drove home that night with the windows down, even though it was cold. February air in Portland smells like rain and pine and something metallic I've never been able to name. I let it fill the car. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. More like direction. Like a compass needle that had been spinning for months finally catching north. I applied to the specialty program in March. Got accepted in April. Started in May. The next several months were the busiest of my life. I was working full shifts at the clinic, logging supervised imaging cases at a partner hospital in Tigard on weekends, studying every night. My apartment became a small fortress of textbooks, case reports, and sticky notes. I barely watched TV. I barely went out. But I wasn't lonely. Not in the way I'd been before. I was building something, and the act of building it filled the empty space my family had left behind. Danielle kept leaving food on my desk. She'd upgraded from granola bars to actual meals, containers of pasta, slices of homemade banana bread, once an entire rotisserie chicken with a note that said, "You look like you haven't seen a vegetable in 3 days. There's broccoli under the chicken. Eat it." If you've ever had someone show up for you not with grand gestures but with small, steady, relentless acts of care, you know what Danielle meant to me. She didn't try to fix my family. She didn't give advice. She just fed me and watched me and made sure I didn't disappear. By late summer, I had logged over 200 imaging cases. My supervisor at the Tigard Hospital, a quiet man named Dr. Orrin Beck, told me my case reports were some of the most detailed he'd reviewed from a technician candidate. I remember the exact moment he said it. We were standing in the imaging suite. The lights dimmed for a fluoroscopy procedure, and he said it without even looking at me, like it was just a fact that didn't need emphasis. That made it mean more. In September, I passed my board exam on the first attempt. I got the email on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the clinic parking lot, sitting in my car, eating a sandwich. I opened the email, read the first line. "Congratulations, you have successfully passed." And I put the sandwich down on my dashboard and pressed both hands against my face, and sat there shaking for 5 minutes. I called Danielle first. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then she said, "I'm buying you dinner tonight, and you're going to eat a real meal at a real table like a real person." She took me to a Thai place on Hawthorne. We sat by the window. She ordered half the menu. I laughed more that night than I had in almost a year. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Toby. The thought crossed my mind. Just for a second. Like a bird landing on a wire and flying off again. But I let it go. They had chosen their silence, and I had chosen my life. The two things no longer needed to intersect. By October, almost exactly a year since I'd found out about the house, I had a new job offer. A specialty veterinary hospital in the Pearl District wanted a credentialed imaging technician. The pay was nearly double what I'd been making. The facility was state-of-the-art. The position came with benefits I'd never had before: real health insurance, a retirement plan, continuing education funding. I gave my notice at the old clinic. My last day was bittersweet. The staff threw me a small party in the break room, store-bought cake, a card everyone signed. Danielle gave me a gift wrapped in newspaper. Inside was a framed photo she'd taken of me months earlier, standing in the imaging suite at Tigard, adjusting the X-ray unit with one hand, my other hand steadying a nervous golden retriever on the table. I didn't even know she'd taken it. In the photo, I look focused, calm, like someone who knows what she's doing. She'd written on the back, "The girl who stayed when it would have been easier to fall apart." I hung that photo next to the one of my dad and me at Cannon Beach. Two pictures, two versions of being held steady. I started the new job in November. The Pearl District Hospital was everything the offer promised: clean, bright, professional. I had my own imaging suite. I worked alongside board-certified surgeons and internists. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in a room where I was supposed to be. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon in early December, I was reviewing a scan on my monitor when my phone buzzed. It was a Portland number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something, instinct, curiosity, fate, whatever you want to call it, made me pick up. "Hi, is this Jessamine Corwill?" "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Bridget Calloway. This might sound strange, but I bought your mother's house on Linden Terrace earlier this year, and I found something I think belongs to you." My hand tightened around the phone. The imaging suite hummed around me, the monitor still glowing with someone else's X-ray. "What did you find?" I asked. "A shoebox," she said. It was hidden in the attic crawlspace, behind the insulation. I was putting in new wiring and my electrician pulled it out. There are letters inside, and photographs, and something that looks like a handwritten will. The room tilted, just slightly, just enough. "A will?" I repeated. "I think it was written by someone named George. I didn't read much, I promise. But your name is on it. Your name is on everything in this box." I left work early that day. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency, which was technically true in a way I couldn't begin to explain. I drove to Linden Terrace in 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire way, my hands locked on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 like I was taking a driving test, my breathing so controlled it felt mechanical. The neighborhood looked the same. The big oak on the corner, the row of mailboxes at the end of the cul-de-sac, Mrs. Anderson's house with the wind chimes that never stopped. And there it was, 4827, sitting at the end of the street like it had been waiting for me. The yellow door was gone. Bridget Calloway had painted it blue, a dark navy blue with a brass knocker in the center. It shouldn't have mattered. It was just paint. But I stood on the sidewalk staring at that blue door, and I felt my father's absence in a way I hadn't in years. Not the dull, familiar ache I carried every day. Something sharper, like bumping a bruise you'd forgotten was there. Bridget opened the door before I knocked. She must have been watching from the window. She was maybe mid-30s, sandy blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing a flannel shirt with paint stains on the cuffs. She looked kind. Not kind in a performative way, kind in a way that lived in the lines, around her eyes, and the way she stepped back immediately to give me room, like she understood that standing on this porch was costing me something. "Jessamine?" she said. "Jess," I told her. "Thank you for calling me." She led me inside. The house was different. New floors. They'd replaced the old carpet with hardwood. The kitchen had been updated. White cabinets where my father's oak ones used to be. The walls were a soft gray instead of the cream I remembered. But the bones were the same. The layout. The sight line from the front door through the living room to the back windows. the way the afternoon light came through the kitchen at an angle and hit the far wall in a long golden stripe. I knew this house the way you know your own body. Every corner, every creak. Bridget brought me to the kitchen table. The shoebox was sitting in the center. It was an old Nike box, the kind from the early 2000s, and the cardboard was soft with age, the corners worn down to fibers. A rubber band held the lid on. My father's handwriting was on the side in black marker. Important, J.C. J.C. Jessamine Corwill, my initials. I sat down. Bridget sat across from me. She didn't say anything. She just folded her hands on the table and waited. I removed the rubber band. I lifted the lid. Inside there were 3 things: a stack of photographs held together with a paperclip, a bundle of letters, maybe 10 or 12, in sealed envelopes with my name written on each one, and at the bottom, a single sheet of legal pad paper folded in thirds, covered in my father's block handwriting. I picked up the legal pad paper first. My hands were trembling so badly the paper shook, and I had to flatten it against the table to read it. It was dated June 14th, 2015, 2 months before my father died. I won't tell you every word because some of it is mine, and I'm keeping it. But I will tell you what it said in essence. My father had written a handwritten will. In it, he stated clearly that upon his death, the house at 4827 Linden Terrace was to remain in the family, and that if it were ever sold, the proceeds were to be split equally between me and Toby. He specified that certain items, his workbench, his tools, his collection of detective novels, and the contents of the attic crawlspace, were to go to me specifically. He wrote that he was placing this document in the crawlspace because, and this is close to his exact words, he wanted to make sure it would be found by someone who cared enough to look. He knew. Sitting in that house, sick and getting sicker, my father knew that my mother might not protect the things he wanted me to have. He didn't say it directly. He didn't accuse her of anything. But he hid that box in a place only a thorough renovation would uncover, and he put my name on it, and he sealed those letters so only I would read them. He knew, and he tried to protect me the only way he could. And it still wasn't enough. I sat at Bridget Calloway's kitchen table, my father's kitchen, and I read that document twice. Then I opened the first letter. It was dated the same day as the will. It began, "Jessamine, my steady girl." That was his phrase for me. Not bright boy, like Toby. Steady girl. He said it when I helped him in the workshop. He said it when I held the paint tray at 4 years old. He said it the night before his first surgery, when I sat next to his hospital bed and held his hand and didn't cry because I thought if I was steady enough, he would be okay. My steady girl. I closed the letter. I couldn't read anymore. Not there. Not yet. Bridget had tears on her face. She wiped them quickly, almost embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't read the letters. Just the will. I wanted to make sure I was giving it to the right person." "You are," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your mother. When we did the final walkthrough before closing, she told us the attic was empty. She said she'd cleared everything out. My husband even asked about the crawl space, and she said there was nothing up there but old insulation. She lied. She told the buyers the crawl space was empty. Maybe she forgot the box was there. Or maybe, and this is what I believe, she knew it was there, and she hoped it would stay buried forever." I took the shoebox home. I drove back to my apartment with it on the passenger seat, buckled in like a child. I carried it upstairs with both hands. I set it on my kitchen table under the overhead light, and I sat with it for a long time before I opened another letter. Over the next 3 nights, I read all 12 letters. Each one was written on a different date across the summer of 2015. the last summer of my father's life. Some were short, some were 2 pages. All of them were addressed to me. He wrote about the cherry tree. He wrote about the science trophy. He wrote about teaching me to use the bandsaw when I was 13, and how I didn't flinch. Not once. And how proud that made him. He wrote about things he hoped for me. Not specific things, not careers or milestones, just that I would find people who saw me clearly and loved what they saw. And in the last letter, dated August 2nd, 2015, 6 days before he died, he wrote something that rearranged everything I thought I understood about my family. He wrote that, in the weeks before his diagnosis, he had been in contact with a lawyer about setting up a trust to protect the house. He wrote that my mother had found out about it and they had argued. Badly. He wrote that she told him if he went through with the trust, she would make things difficult. He didn't explain what that meant. He just wrote, "She has her reasons, and I have mine, and I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to finish what I started." My father tried to protect the house for me. My mother stopped him. And then he died, and she sold it, and she gave the money to Toby. I sat in my kitchen holding that last letter, and I felt something I hadn't felt in all these months of silence and grief and rebuilding. I felt clear. Not angry, not sad. Clear. Like a lens snapping into focus. Like an X-ray finally showing the fracture that had been there all along, hidden under layers of tissue and time. Tell me what you would have done in that moment. Because I know what I did. I picked up my phone. I called Bridget Calloway. And I asked her if she would be willing to meet my mother. I didn't rush it. That was important to me. I had spent my whole life reacting to my mother's decisions on her timeline, finding out too late, scrambling to catch up, trying to process while she had already moved on to her next version of events. This time, I was going to move at my own pace. I spent a week preparing. I took photographs of every letter, every envelope, the handwritten will, front and back. I scanned them at the library on a public flatbed scanner, one by one, and saved the files to a flash drive and a cloud account. I made 2 printed copies of everything. One I kept in my apartment, in a folder in my closet. The other I gave to Danielle for safekeeping, along with a sealed envelope explaining the situation in case anything happened to the originals. Danielle didn't ask me to explain everything. She just took the envelope, put it in her bag, and said, "I've got it." That was all I needed. I also took the handwritten will to a legal aid office downtown. I wanted to understand what it meant, whether it had any standing, whether it changed anything. The attorney I spoke to, a young guy with tired eyes and a cluttered desk, told me the truth plainly. A handwritten will, a holographic will, could be considered valid in certain states under certain conditions, but Oregon was not one of those states. Oregon required witnesses, signatures, formal probate. My father's letter, written alone in his attic while cancer was eating him from the inside, didn't meet those requirements. It might not hold up in court, he said, but it clearly expresses intent, and if there were ever a dispute about what your father wanted, this would be powerful evidence of his wishes. Powerful evidence of his wishes. I held on to that phrase. It wasn't a legal victory, but it was the truth, written in my father's hand, and sometimes the truth is its own kind of authority. The next thing I did was look into the house sale itself. This part took time and a few phone calls. The house had sold for $385,000. I found this through public records, county assessor's office, property transfer documents, all available online if you know where to look. $385,000. After realtor fees and closing costs, my mother likely walked away with somewhere around $350,000. I thought about that number. I thought about the $80 SAT prep course she told me we couldn't afford. I thought about the $200 jacket she bought Toby without blinking. Then I did one more thing. I called an old neighbor from Linden Terrace, Mrs. Anderson, the one with the wind chimes. She was 78, and sharp as a blade, and had lived on that street since before I was born. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she remembered me immediately. Jessamine! Little Jessamine with the science projects. How are you, dear? I told her I was well. I asked if she'd seen much of my mother before the move. She had. And what she told me filled in the last gap. In the months before the sale, Toby had been at the house frequently, multiple times a week. Mrs. Anderson saw his car in the driveway regularly, sometimes early morning, sometimes late at night. She said she once saw him carrying boxes out of the garage and loading them into his trunk. She assumed he was helping my mother pack. But she also told me something else. There was a woman with him a few times, she said, young, blonde, hair. They were looking at the house like they were measuring rooms. Toby had brought someone to the house before it sold, someone who was looking at it like a buyer, or like someone who expected to benefit from the sale. I didn't know who the woman was then. I found out later. Her name was Kristen. She was Toby's girlfriend, someone he'd been seeing for about 8 months. She had expensive taste and no income of her own, according to what I eventually pieced together from social media and a single, revealing conversation I'd have much later. Toby was trying to impress her. He needed money to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. And my mother, who had never once denied her bright boy anything, handed him the house. I had the full picture now. Not every detail, but enough. I called my mother on a Saturday morning. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding cautious. Jessamine. Mom, I'd like to come see you. I have something I'd like to talk about in person. A pause. What? About? The house. I found something that belonged to Dad, and I think you should see it. Another pause. Longer. I could hear her breathing. I don't think there's anything left to discuss about the house. There is, I said, and I'd rather do this face to face. She agreed reluctantly. I think curiosity won over caution. Or maybe she thought I'd found something small. An old photo, a trinket. Something she could dismiss and move past. She didn't know about the shoebox. She didn't know about the will. She didn't know that the crawl space she'd told the buyers was empty had given up its secret. I drove to her apartment the following Tuesday after work. Multnomah Boulevard. A beige building with a security door and a small parking lot. Her unit was on the 2nd floor. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and someone's microwave dinner. She opened the door wearing a gray cardigan and reading glasses pushed up on her head. The apartment was neat, well furnished. New couch, new television. A kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that were nicer than anything we'd had on Linden Terrace. I looked at those countertops and thought about my father's old laminate kitchen, where he used to make me scrambled eggs on Saturday mornings. We sat in her living room. She offered me tea. I declined. So, she said, what did you find? I opened my bag and placed the shoebox on her coffee table. She looked at it. I watched her face. And there it was. A flicker. Quick. Almost invisible. A tightening around her eyes. A slight pull at the corner of her mouth. She recognized that box. She knew exactly what it was. Where did you get that? She asked. Her voice was still measured, but the pitch had shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Bridget Calloway found it in the attic crawl space, behind the insulation, the crawl space you told her was empty. My mother didn't move. She sat very still, hands in her lap, eyes on the box. She called me, I continued. She opened it, saw my name on everything inside, and called me. She did the thing you should have done. Jessamine. There's a will in there, Mom. Dad wrote it. June 2015. He wanted the house proceeds split between me and Toby. He wanted his tools and his books to go to me. He put it all in writing and he hid it in the crawlspace because he didn't trust you to follow through. She flinched. It was small, but I saw it. That's not a legal document, she said. He never filed anything. There was no probate, no attorney. I know. I've already spoken to a lawyer. It's not legally binding in Oregon, but it's his words, Mom. In his handwriting. Dated and clear. And every single letter in that box is addressed to me. Not to you. Not to Toby. To me. She was quiet for a long time. The apartment was so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Then she said, "Your father was sentimental. He didn't understand the financial realities of maintaining a property like that. The roof alone. You gave the money to Toby." She stopped. $385,000, I said. Public record. After fees, somewhere around $350. And you gave it to Toby. For what? For Kristen? For his rent? For whatever he told you he needed this time? Type karma in the comments if you believe the truth always comes out. Because in that apartment, on that beige couch, with that shoebox sitting between us like a detonation, the truth was finally out. And my mother, for the first time in my entire life, had no version of events left to hide behind. She didn't deny it. That's the part that still sits with me. She didn't deny any of it. She sat on that beige couch with her hands folded in her lap, and she looked at the shoebox and she said, very quietly, Toby was in trouble. I waited. He had debts, credit cards, a car loan he couldn't cover. He came to me last year and told me he was in over his head. And what was I supposed to do, Jessamine? He's my son. I'm your daughter, I said. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not guilt exactly, but the shadow of it. The shape guilt leaves behind when someone has spent a long time convincing themselves they did the right thing and is only now starting to feel the floor shift beneath that conviction. You were always fine, she said. You were always steady. You had your job, your apartment. Toby needed help. He's not like you. He doesn't just land on his feet. There it was. The logic she'd built her entire motherhood on. Toby was fragile, so Toby got everything. I was steady, so I got nothing. My competence had become her permission to neglect me. My resilience had been misread as evidence that I didn't need her. Every time I handled something on my own, she took it as proof that she didn't have to show up. I could have screamed. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to pick up that shoebox and shake the letters out across her coffee table and make her read every single one while I stood over her and said, "This is what a parent who saw me looks like." But I didn't. I sat in that chair across from my mother, and I breathed. And I spoke in a voice that was calm and level and entirely my own. Dad wanted me to have half of the proceeds from that house. He wrote it down. He hid it in a place he hoped I'd find it. You knew he had concerns about what would happen after he was gone. He tried to set up a trust, and you fought him on it. He wrote about that too. Her lips pressed together. A thin, bloodless line. She didn't ask how I knew about the trust. She didn't have to. The letters explained everything. I'm not here to sue you, I said. I've already been told the will probably wouldn't hold up in court. And honestly, even if it would, I don't want to spend the next 2 years in a legal fight with my own mother. That's not the life I'm building. She blinked. Something shifted in her posture. A slight release, like she'd been bracing for impact, and the hit hadn't come the way she expected. But I need you to understand something, I continued. What you did wasn't just about money. You sold the last physical place on Earth that still held Dad's presence. You erased his marks on the doorframe. You donated his workbench. You let Toby load boxes from the garage into his car. And then you sold the house and gave the money to him, and you never once, not once, called me. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask if there was anything I wanted to keep. You didn't even let me walk through the rooms one last time. My voice stayed even. I'm proud of that. Not because anger would have been wrong, but because steadiness was my inheritance. My father gave me that. My steady girl. I was going to honor it. That wasn't a financial decision, Mom. That was a choice about who matters. And you made it very clearly. She opened her mouth. Closed. It. Opened it again. I didn't think You didn't think I'd find out. I know. Silence. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on Multnomah Boulevard below the window. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm keeping the shoebox. The letters, the photos, the will, those are mine. Dad wrote them for me. I'm also keeping a scanned copy of everything, and another copy is with someone I trust. This isn't a threat. It's just the truth being held in safe hands for the first time. She nodded. Barely. I'm not going to pretend we're fine. We're not fine. You made a series of choices over a very long time that told me exactly where I stand with you, and I believe you. I believe the message you've been sending since I was 12 years old. Jessamine, that's not… Let me finish. I said it gently, not sharp, just firm. I'm not cutting you out of my life. I'm not making some dramatic declaration, but I am setting a boundary, and the boundary is this. I will not chase you anymore. I will not write letters that get called manipulative. I will not sit by the phone on Christmas waiting for a call that doesn't come. If you want a relationship with me, you will need to build it. You will need to show up. And you will need to do it honestly. Not because Toby's run out of money again and you need to balance the scales. She was crying, quietly, without sound, the way people cry when they're not performing grief but actually feeling it. I don't know if she was crying because she was sorry or because she was ashamed or because she was simply confronted with a version of her daughter she didn't recognize. Someone who wasn't waiting in the blind spot anymore. I stood up. I picked up the shoebox. I put it in my bag. One more thing, I said. I'd like you to tell Toby what Dad wrote in that will. I'd like him to know that Dad intended for the money to be split. What Toby does with that information is his business, but he should have it. She nodded again. Whether she actually told him, I don't know. Toby has never brought it up with me, and I haven't asked. Some doors you open and then you walk away from. What happens on the other side isn't yours to manage. I drove home that evening through the kind of December rain that turns Portland into a city of reflections. Headlights and street lamps doubled on the wet pavement, the whole world mirrored and soft. I parked in front of my building and sat in the car for a few minutes with the engine off, listening to the rain on the roof. I thought about my dad. I thought about him hiding that shoebox in the crawlspace on a summer day in 2015, sick and tired and running out of time, climbing into that dusty space to tuck a Nike box behind the insulation, because it was the only way he could think of to reach me from the other side of death. He couldn't protect the house. He couldn't change the will. He couldn't make my mother love me the way I needed. But he could write 12 letters and a document that said, plainly and without conditions, I see you. You mattered. You were never invisible to me. I went upstairs. I set the shoebox on my kitchen table. I made a cup of tea. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, with my framed watercolor of the coast and my photo from Cannon Beach, and Danielle's picture of me in the imaging suite, and my faded gold science trophy on the bookshelf. And I opened the first letter again. Jessamine, my steady girl. I read it slowly this time. No rush, no grief pulling at the edges. Just my father's voice, steady and clear, reaching across 10 years of silence to remind me of something I almost forgot. You don't need someone to give you a place in the world. You build it, board by board, nail by nail. And when the people who were supposed to hold space for you refuse, you hold it for yourself. Not with anger, not with revenge. With the quiet, stubborn certainty that you were always worth more than what they offered. Outside, the rain kept falling. The cherry tree on Linden Terrace was still standing. Bridget told me she loved it, that she'd hung a bird feeder from its lowest branch. My father's tree, feeding something new. If this story stayed with you, I want you to know that it stays with me too. Every single day. If you've ever been the steady one in a family that mistook your strength for permission to overlook you, I see you. You're not invisible. You never were. Thank you for listening, all the way to the end. If this meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them. Because some truths don't stay buried forever, even when someone tries very hard to make sure they do.